Let's talk a little bit about the antibiotics issue, because this is something that comes up related to some of the diseases or issues that cattle sometimes have in the finishing process. Is this question about the antibiotics that are given to them at various phases of the life cycle. So when do they get antibiotics, and what kinds, and why are they given, and are there worries about overuse? And of course the big worry is the resistant superbug that gets developed and then comes and affects us as well.
The biggest challenge to beef production is a disease called bovine respiratory disease, BRD. And it's not a disease unlike that we suffer in humans. When our kids are at home before kindergarten, they're all healthy. But all of a sudden we send them to kindergarten where you mix all these kids and different pathogens. The kids come home with sniffles and colds. Well, we do the same thing with cattle. As I said, we wean them, and then at that stage they generally go in larger groups. And so whenever that stress of weaning, meeting new other cattle, the pathogens mix up, and what immunity was there at the home farm is not there to cover the new bugs. And so antibiotics are used during that phase, one, to try to lessen as a preventative, and then as a treatment for that disease. Interestingly enough, they're doing some work on the genetics of that.
Okay.
They think they are beginning to find some markers that will identify those breeds and animals that can resist that disease, which would be a huge boon for the industry.
And that would cut down on the antibiotic use.
Certainly,
Okay.
certainly, because it's a costly disease. It's costly from the standpoint of mortality and morbidity, but it also affects meat quality, we found out as well. So nobody wants that.
So I think the picture that a lot of people have is that these animals are just awash in antibiotics for basically prophylactic reasons. Like, we don't care whether it's sick now or not, we're just going to give it all of these antibiotics so that it doesn't get sick. It's kind of the easy answer. It's like the farmers spraying fields with pesticides everywhere just in the hopes that they kill any pests that are there. Is that how it's done, or is it more precision? Is it more focused on actually sick animals?
It's about 87% of the antibiotics, according to the Animal Health Institute, are used for therapeutic reasons, that is, for animals that actually get sick. So it's a small amount that's used in a preventative manner. And those classifications are changing in time as well. So understand, too, that and at the feedlot level, which we're not that we can't see bovine respiratory disease in grass finishing, but at the feedlot level, about nearly 100% of those feedlots have a veterinarian that works with them on a regular basis.
Okay. Diagnosing illnesses.
Diagnosing, prescribing,
okay.
Working with the crew to make sure it's administered per label instructions and so on. So.
And what's the difference between a therapeutic use and a subtherapeutic use and a preventative use?
Right. So subtherapeutic would fall into that characteristic of control and prevention. And then therapeutics when there's an actual diagnosis of disease. That is becoming more strict over time. There's a thing called a voluntary number 2000 or 209, where all pharmaceutical companies were asked voluntarily to remove the growth promotion part of the label off of that, because there is a small number of antibiotics that are used strictly for growth promotion. And there's I won't get the numbers exactly right, but I think there's 36 companies and 35 have agreed to that. So within 3 years, these products cannot be used for growth promotion if that's their only label. And so that's a good thing. The industry will reduce. The industry is very supportive of that concept.
The industry's worried then about the issue. There is, of course, the resistance concern. They're trying to reduce the amount of antibiotics used. The government is getting more worried and involved. The public's concerned. Is it the case, though, that these animals still are using a huge amount of antibiotics such that we should worry about resistance?
Well, there's two things we'll talk about. One is how drugs are approved for animal use.
Right.
And then we'll also talk about, you often hear that 80% of the antibiotics produced in the United States go to animals. But we need to break that down a little bit.
Okay.
So the numbers are about 30 million pounds are produced for animal agriculture, and about 9 million are produced for human use. Okay, that's pretty bad. That's about a 4-to-1 ratio. But about 30% of those antibiotics that are included in that 30 million pounds are in a class called ionophores. And an ionophore is something that helps the rumen be more effective, be more efficient. It's not used in human medicine, so it's not medically important. It's been used for 40 years, and there's been no resistance shown in cattle.
But are these the growth-promoting ones that you said that are now being phased out?
No, because the only ones that are being phased out are those that are medically important.
Okay.
And this one is not. It doesn't go systemic, so in other words, it stays just in the digestive tract. And so you really have to, it is an antimicrobial because it kills certain bacteria in the rumen and favors others, so it does have that action, but it has no impact on humans. So we remove that out, and now we're to a ratio of about 3-to-1. Okay, of animals, or of animal to humans. But humans weigh a whole lot less than animals. So in fact, there's about 88 billion more pounds of animals than there are humans, and animals are given antibiotics on a per pound basis. Different from humans, which if you and I went to the doctor and we weigh 50 pounds different, you'd take the same dose as I would.
Right.
It's not adjusted for weight, whereas in animals it is. So you account for all of that, and then you get down to about a 1-to-1 ratio. So the amount of antibiotics produced for humans and used and produced for animals and used is about the same.
Per pound.
Per pound all the way through.
And, okay, so it's not as, I mean, in a way, the gross numbers are still...
Are true, but
Yeah.
you've got to understand them.
Okay.
Yeah.
How do you get antibiotics? Can you just go to the store and get them in the grain supply
Few and
aisle,
few,
or no?
fewer and fewer are available that way, and the expectation is penicillin, for example, is available at a tractor or at a feed store. That all of those will begin to be removed, and you'll have to have a script. But most of the ones that are really effective and do a nice job are now available by script only. That is through a veterinarian, and so that'll
That has
change.
to say, you can only give this much, and I'll write you a prescription for this. And
Exactly right.
And this is because the government is worried about the resistance issues and overuse.
And they want to just
Yeah.
make sure animal agriculture is doing its part, because the whole resistance thing is extremely complex in terms of what's the cause and so on. So animal agriculture is interested in doing their part. And I think it's also important to understand how drugs are approved for animal agriculture. The procedure is exactly the same for human medicine as it is for animal medicine. They have to go through the same FDA tests. They have to go through this no observable effect level type thing, which happens in humans. The difference is that for animals, one is that they have to show that there's no resistance buildup. Two, they have to show there's no meat withdrawal, which of course you and I take antibiotics, no one's worried about how much ends up in our tissue, but that can't occur in animals. So there's further restrictions on animal drugs before they get approved.
Sorry, why can't it occur? I mean, because people wouldn't want to eat steaks that have antibiotics in them, or?
Oh, certainly. I mean, in fact, the meat, no meat in the stores has antibiotics in it. I mean, that's what you'll hear is full of antibiotics.
I mean, I don't know. It sounds like a health benefit to me. Like, your steak and some
and your antibiotics at the same
there.
time.
Yeah,
Sure,
yeah.
sure.